It's the first week of a new decade. We stand on the threshold of huge technological disruptions that will affect every industry. The aim of this channel is to prepare you for the coming disruptions and to show you some strategies that I am using to position myself to profit from them. In this episode, we'll review areas of technological innovation that are about to cause disruption, explain what drives disruption and how it progresses. In the next video, we'll look at the elephant in the room when it comes to the disruption of the auto industry, which is, of course, Tesla. In the following video, we'll develop a strategy to profit from disruptions, and in subsequent videos, I'll walk you through how to put that strategy into practice. So, what are the areas of innovation that we're going to be talking about in this series? Well, they are the following. 1. Electricity generation, storage and supply. 2. Blockchain, cryptocurrencies and mobile wallets. 3. Gene sequencing, interpretation and editing. 4. Additive manufacturing, or otherwise known as 3D printing. And robotics, and in particular co-robots. Now, before we dive into the detail, let's step back and consider how innovation causes disruption to existing industries. It turns out that disruption is triggered by cost declines and convergence of technologies. Now, many of you will be familiar with Moore's law that says that the number of transistors on a chip doubles every 2 years. However, you might not have heard of Wright's law. Now, Wright's law from 1936 says that we learn by doing. The cost of a unit decreases as a function of cumulative production. So while studying production costs during the 1920s, Theodore Wright determined that for every cumulative doubling in the number of aeroplanes produced, manufacturers realized a consistent cost decline in percentage terms. The cost to produce the 2,000th plane was 15% less than to produce the 1,000th plane, and the cost of the 4,000th plane was 15% less than that. So this cost decline occurs wherever we manufacture and learn by producing more product. So if we look at this chart of the price of the Model T between 1909 and 1923, we can see that as cumulative production moved from 10,000 to 100,000 to 1 million and on to nearly 10 million, the price fell in a consistent way as predicted by Wright's law. To take a more modern example, the price of solar electricity has also declined in a consistent way with each doubling of the installed capacity of solar panels. Turning to lithium-ion batteries, again we see a consistent cost decline each time the cumulative production doubles. And it is this change that has led us to the point where electric cars are now cost competitive with internal combustion engine cars when looked at from the perspective of total cost of ownership. In other fields, such as gene sequencing, we started with the Human Genome Project, where the cost to sequence the first genome was about $2.7 billion, and it took 14 years. And we can now sequence a genome for about $300 in a single day. So how quickly do disruptions occur? Well, in fact, disruptions always occur in an S-curve, not as a linear transition. So if we look at this graph, we see that over time, adoption of whatever the new technology is moves from 0 to 100%, but it does so first very slowly, but then with an exponential increase until it reaches a tipping point. There then is a period of very rapid adoption, and then the curve starts to flatten off again as you approach 100%. It's been observed that all new technologies follow this S-curve adoption pattern, but as forecasters tend to forecast the future as straight-line projections, knowing that things happen in an S-curve gives us an advantage. Now, of course, as the new technology takes over, we can see a similar S-curve in the decline of the old technology. And if we move on to look at a real example, we can see that during the transition from horses to cars that happened in the early part of the 20th century, There was a slow ramp up to about 1910, and then between 1910 and 1920, in the US, cars went from 10% to 80% adoption in just 10 years. And during those 10 years, it was also necessary to build an oil industry and to fight a world war. So these adoptions, when they get going, can occur very rapidly. Now let's consider what's about to happen in the auto industry. So we're going to see a transition from internal combustion engine cars to EVs driven by AI. And we're very near the tipping point of this transition. And so between 2020 and 2030, I expect to see a very rapid transition, a big ramp in the production and sale of EVs, and a precipitous decline in the production and sale of internal combustion engine cars. It's also worth noting that I'm not expecting a one-for-one replacement of ICE cars with EVs. And the reason for that is because EVs will be driven by AI, it becomes possible to use them as a transport as a service model. At the moment, personally owned cars sit parked for 96% of the time and are only used for 4% of the time. Once cars can drive themselves, it's likely that the usage will jump to at least 40% and possibly higher. So if it just jumps from 4 to 40%, then obviously each car is driving 10 times more than was previously the case. You only need perhaps a tenth of those cars to cover demand. Now, I do expect that demand for transport will increase because the price will drop so dramatically that there will be more miles travelled. So I don't expect the number of cars to drop by 90%. And it will still be the case that some people will want to own their own cars, particularly in rural areas. But in the city, we can expect a lot of people to switch away from personal ownership of a car to just subscribing to a transport as a service. So you can think of this as basically an Uber or Lyft, although it will be an autonomous car that you can order up and it will take you anywhere you want to go, and it's going to cost maybe of the order of 10 to 20 cents per mile. So you think about that for a minute, that means a 10-mile journey is going to cost $1 to $2. And you'll probably be able to subscribe to these services for a fixed dollar amount, say $100 or $200 a month for all the travel you want. And then compare that with purchasing your own car, the financing, the insurance, and all the other things that go with it. For many people, it's going to be the case that they won't want a car in the future. And in fact, we've already seen about a 10% drop-off in the demand for personal cars just from the current sort of Uber and Lyft models, which are actually relatively expensive compared with what's coming. So I do expect that the number of EVs driven by AI will not be as high as the 90 million cars that are produced a year at the moment. So say maybe it's only 50 million. But in either event, the internal combustion engine cars are going to fall away very rapidly. Okay, so our initial focus will be on disruption of the auto industry. And let's go ahead and state a core theory. And it is this. Due to cost declines of battery storage and AI compute power, and the convergence of these technologies, we are on the threshold of a transition from traditional internal combustion engine powered cars to electric vehicles driven by AI. We will also see a transition from individual ownership of cars to a transport as a service model consumed via subscription and up to 10 times cheaper than an Uber today. The cost differential between car ownership and transport as a service will override other factors that affect consumer choice and ensure that TaaS will be adopted wherever it is available. For subscribers of such services, it's more like an airline where you're most concerned with cost, comfort, and entertainment. Airline passengers care little whether they are in a Boeing or an Airbus. Robotaxi subscribers will likewise care little about the brand of the car that picks them up. In the next video, we'll look at Tesla, the disruptor of the auto industry. In the meantime, if you enjoyed the video, please do press the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us get found by others. I know I don't have all the answers, and I want to learn from everyone who watches these videos so I can share that knowledge with you all. If you think I missed anything important, or got something wrong, or you have a suggestion for future content, please let me know in the comments. I really want your feedback, and I will read all your comments. Please also consider supporting the channel on Patreon. You can do that at patreon.com/profitfromdisruption. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.